In the Old West, the line between trespasser and savior was thinner than dust on the wind. 200 Apache warriors surrounded a lone man's cabin at dawn, their silence heavier than any bullet. But when the chief's daughter appeared out of the smoke, the story changed forever. This is not about conquest. It's about the moment a man learned that courage doesn't come from a rifle. It comes from standing where mercy is harder than violence. Welcome to 200 Apache warriors ambushed his cabin, but the chief's daughter appeared. Another chapter of Old West stories, where honor and survival walk the same narrow trail. Before we begin the story, tell me where you are, and what time it is where you are. Part 1. The Ambush at Sandglass Basin. The morning over Sandglass Basin broke the color of old brass-thin sun, cold wind, a dryness that made breath feel like prayer. Cole Mercer had lived here long enough to know sounds the desert made when it was empty and when it was full of trouble. This was the latter. He caught it the way old horses do ear before eye. A soft ripple of leather, the muffled clack of wooden beads, a single snort held and swallowed. Then the line resolved. Riders, many, 200 at least, spread in a wide crescent drawing tight around his cabin like a lasso. Cole laid his rifle on the table and stepped outside without it. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the only weapon that mattered was what a man didn't bring. The yard smelled of dry juniper and last night's coffee grounds. Wind lifted the dust in purposeful skeins. On the rim, ranks of Apache riders sat their ponies in terrible, beautiful silence. At their center, a tall man with hawk feather braids held still as a carved post. The rider's eyes had the steadiness of men who'd carried grief so long that it wore smooth. Cole felt his heart pace out the yard boards beneath his boots. The tall man spoke. "You built on the old bones." Cole's tongue felt too big for his mouth. "I didn't know." Knowing is not required for harm. The man's gaze moved once over Cole's cabin, then settled back. "I am Chief Gray Thunder. You will answer." Before Cole could shape another sentence, a flicker of motion cut the line of stallions and spear points. She came forward like a decision already made. The chief's daughter. She wore a river blue wrap, sewn with small silver rounds that caught the pale sun. A glass bead hung at her throat, clouded like a storm about to choose a valley. Her hair was braided with crow feathers and turquoise. Her eyes were not unkind, only exact. Cole had never seen her, but something in his chest behaved as if he'd been waiting. Her voice was steady. "Why here?" "Water," Cole said. "A thin seam under the caliche. You can hear it if you lay your ear to the ground when the wind stops." "I was just trying to live quiet." Her eyes didn't move from his face. "Your quiet sits inside our dead." The circle tightened. Lance tips made that faint iron hiss like rain imagined. Cole raised both hands. "If I've trespassed, I'll pull up and go." Gray Thunder's eyes didn't blink. A man who runs leaves the hurt behind him for others to find. The daughter lifted a hand, and the crescent of riders held. "Father," she said, "let him speak later. Listen to the ridge now." On the ridge, a glint glass or gun steel. Then the crack arrived, bright and flat. A second, lower, from the left. The ambush had an ambush. Men Cole did recognize railroad cutters and stray guns from Lantry, tumbled along the rim with rifles. Dust on their faces like a second skin. They were the kind that saw ink and blood as liquids you could swap. "Deeds," someone shouted. "The spring and the benchland. Drop your weapons." The Apache line reformed without a shout. Cole saw where the first bullets were going, low and mean. Not at the chief, but at the woman beside him, the bright spark that could break men without a blade if you let her stand long enough. He didn't think. He ran. The first shot snapped air where his ribs had been. The second cut a splinter from his doorpost that stung his neck like a bee. Cole hit the yard hard, and Rose already turned to put his spine between her and gunfire. He smelled horse sweat, felt the shade of her pony's barrel over his shoulder. A laugh from the ridge. "Look there, cowboy wants Apache eyes on him." Gray Thunder's face didn't change. But when he spoke, it was a command. "You protect what you placed yourself before." "I protect what shouldn't be shot at because some clerk wrote a crooked map," Cole said. And the old part of him wondered who had put that sudden certainty in his mouth. The first proper volley tore the morning open. The Apache line replied with long rifles that sounded like doorways closing. Arrows took the wind and stitched the rim with swift new handwriting. Cole dove to the porch, grabbed the Henry he'd left on the table, and rolled back into the yard. He didn't aim at faces, he cut at legs and hands. The machinery of harm. One man pinwheeled and went down in the pepperweed. Another shouted for his mother in a voice too young for the beard he'd glued on his jaw. "Father," the daughter called. "The pouch." Cole saw it then, red-stitched leather tied to Gray Thunder's saddle, heavy with the weight of something that made wolves out of clerks. Deeds. Grants. The paper shapes of rivers. Folded wrong. "Cover me," Cole snapped, and didn't wait to learn if the order fit his station. He went low across the yard, felt bullets shave, weathered boards beside his head, got a mouthful of dust that tasted like the Basin in drought. A dark pony screamed and reared. A boy's hand, no older than 15, held his reins steady, as if the animal's fear could choose otherwise, if given a chance. Cole cut the knots, stuffed the pouch under his shirt, and turned to find Gray Thunder already beside him, firing with the measured rhythm of men who understand time is also a weapon. "You run fast for a man who said he would not," Gray Thunder said, almost conversational. "Running toward is a different thing," Cole breathed. By the time the smoke resolved into its thinner aftertaste, 5 of the men from Lantry lay in crooked shapes among the cholla. The rest broke and ran, dragging somebody who bled too much to keep. The echo went off toward the railroad cut like a sound ashamed to come back. Silence had weight again. The riders let out their breath as one creature. Gray Thunder lifted his chin. "Daughter," he said, "speak the name you chose for this day." She dismounted, boots touching the ground with that quiet that old fighters have. Up close, her eyes held the burn of someone who'd kept watch more than she'd slept. "I am Taya," she said. "Taya," Cole repeated, the short shape of it landing somewhere behind his heart. "You are on our ground," she said. "You are also not the men who came to kill us. Those are 2 truths. We will see what they do together." Gray Thunder's gaze shifted to the ragged rim of Cole's cabin. The single chair, the 2 tin cups, the worn Bible with a sprig of rabbit brush pressed at Job. He nodded once. "We bury our dead. When the sun moves a hand, we talk." The riders turned with a precision that wasn't for show, and for the first time since dawn, Cole's hands started to shake. He felt the pouch under his shirt like a second heartbeat. Taya watched him. "You chose to stand between," she said softly. "Not praise, not question. It seemed wrong to let a bullet teach you what you already knew," Cole answered. "What do you think I know? That men from Lantry don't stop at one try, and that the spring under my floor is why they came." Her eyes dipped once to the cabin as if she could hear the water too. When they rose, there was something like surprise in them. "You hear Earth," she said. "Sometimes," Cole said. "When I remember to stop talking." Taya's mouth almost smiled. "Almost. Then you will do one more quiet thing. When the sun moves a hand, you will come to the edge of the wash alone. No gun, only the pouch. We'll see if a man can be as unarmed as he says." Cole nodded. "I'll be there." She turned to go, then paused, eyes narrowing a fraction. "You carry a bead in your pocket," she said. Cole's thumb rubbed the small glass in his vest by reflex. "Found it in a dry arroyo near Hanged Woman Bluff 3 winters ago. Looked like it wanted out of the sand." "It belonged to my mother," Taya said. The words simple as water in a cup. Bring it when you come. When she left, the yard felt larger, as if the horizon had stepped back. Cole's breath returned in pieces. He stood alone in the thin shade of his porch until the wind remembered itself, and a hawk took the morning's measure with a single sweep. He cleaned the Henry slow, hands settling task by task. He scalded a tin cup and poured the grounds over the fence line for the soil to work on. When the sun had shifted the width of his hand on the cabin wall, Cole tucked the pouch inside his shirt, pocketed the small clouded bead, and walked down to the edge of the wash with his palms open to the world. Part 2. The Test Without Rifles. The morning broke pale and thin. A soft gray dawn stretched across the rim of the basin like breath on glass. The smell of gunpowder had finally thinned from the air, replaced by damp earth and the faint sweetness of sage. A single hawk circled above the ridge, silent, patient, watching the valley heal itself. The world seemed calm again, but Cole Mercer knew better. Calm was what the frontier wore right before it asked a man what he truly was. He stood at the edge of the wash, where the water cut a shallow silver vein through sand and stone. His hands were raw from burying the dead Apache and white alike, and his mind ached with the weight of yesterday's noise. For every body lowered into the soil, another question had risen in him. How long could a man keep his soul intact out here, where every sunrise demanded proof of it? From the high bluff came the low rumble of voices. Chief Gray Thunder was speaking with his elders. Cole could not hear the words, but he felt them in the stillness that followed. When the chief finally appeared, he came without weapons. Only the weight of command moved with him, heavy as stone. Taya walked behind her father, her braid loosed by the wind, the turquoise beads glinting like captured sky. She looked different in daylight, less apparition, more resolve. Cole felt the brief, strange tightening in his chest that came whenever her eyes found his, as if she could see all the places inside him he'd kept boarded shut. Gray Thunder stopped a few paces away. "You carried the pouch," he said. Cole nodded. "It's here, and you did not open it." "No, sir." "That is good. Temptation is a louder enemy than any rifle." The chief gestured toward a flat rock between them. Cole set the red-stitched pouch down. The old man rested his palm on it, as though feeling the heartbeat of the land itself. "These papers," Gray Thunder said, "speak in a language that kills quietly. My people have learned to fear such silence. You stood with us against men who bring that silence. But standing once is easy. A snake can strike once and call itself brave. The question is whether a man can live among those he saved and still be true to them." "I mean to try," Cole answered. "Then try this way." The chief turned to an elder who carried a long bundle wrapped in duskin. He unrolled it carefully to reveal a bow darkened by sweat and oil, its curve elegant, its string taut as memory. "You will hunt as we hunt," Gray Thunder said. "No rifles, no thunder of iron. There is a mountain lion that takes our colts from the north ridge. Bring back its hide, or bring back nothing at all. Both will tell me what kind of man you are." Cole met the chief's eyes. There was no malice in them, only truth, hard, immovable truth. "When do I start?" "Now, before the sun remembers its strength." Taya stepped forward then, the faintest tremor in her voice. "Father, the ridge is steep. He should not go alone." Gray Thunder's reply was soft but final. "If he cannot walk alone, he cannot walk with us." Cole slung the bow over his shoulder and accepted a small quiver of arrows. Taya's gaze lingered on him, unreadable. "Follow the sound of crows," she whispered. "They always find what bleeds." The reeve relivers. He left the camp as the light sharpened from gray to gold. The land unfolded around him, immense and indifferent. Juniper and mesquite bent low to the wind. Lizards scattered like sparks ahead of his boots. Somewhere behind him, the Apache camp began its morning rhythm, fires kindling, horses snorting, children laughing at nothing. He felt the separation like a thin cut across the skin. The trail wound upward through broken shale. Cole paused often to study the ground. Tracks spoke clearer than words out here. The lion's prints were deep, the claws faintly visible, large male, heavy, unafraid. A fresh kill lay half-hidden under a bush. A young deer, its flank torn, the blood still bright. Cole crouched and touched the soil warm. The predator wasn't far. He moved slowly, careful not to let rock shift under his weight. Every few steps he stopped and listened. The wind carried distant crow calls, ragged and impatient. He followed them. By midday, the sun burned high and merciless. Sweat streaked the dust on his face. The bow felt heavier with each climb. Then, in the hollow of a rock ledge, he saw motion, a flash of tawny hide blending into shadow. Two golden eyes fixed on him, ancient, steady, without hatred. The lion's gaze held him for a long heartbeat. It was not a challenge but a question. Which of us is the intruder? Cole raised the bow, drew until the wood creaked, and let the arrow fly. It struck true, just behind the shoulder. The cat roared once, deep and terrible, then bounded forward. Cole rolled aside, as claws tore the air where his chest had been. A second later it collapsed, chest heaving, life leaving in a slow shudder. Cole knelt beside it. "Forgive me," he whispered. "You were only doing what hunger told you." He waited until the stillness returned, then set to work with the small knife on his belt, cutting with care, reverence, rather than triumph. When the hide was clean, he wrapped it in cloth, and began the long walk back. The basin was turning amber when he returned. Taya was the first to see him. She stood from where she'd been tending a fire, and came to meet him halfway. Cole laid the bundle at her feet. The lion's eyes, now dull, caught the last light of the setting sun, like coins paying an old debt. "You did not waste," she said. "I took only what I must. That is our way." Her father approached then, the elders following. Gray Thunder studied the hide, then lifted his gaze to Cole. "You tracked alone. You fought fair. You brought back what you took. These are the marks of a man who listens to the land." He turned to his people. "Remember this. A man's blood may speak one tongue, but his heart can learn another. It's like for live." A murmur of agreement passed through the circle. One of the younger warriors, the same who had shouted for Cole's death the day before, looked away in silence. Gray Thunder gestured to the fire. "Eat with us. Tonight, you are not stranger." As darkness settled, drums began a slow heartbeat rhythm that filled the space between stars. The Apache sang songs older than the words Cole knew, melodies that rose and fell like the wind over dunes. Smoke carried the scent of meat and juniper. For the first time in years, he felt something inside him unclench. Taya sat across the fire, her face painted by the glow. After a while she crossed to him, carrying 2 cups carved from hollowed horn. She handed one to him and sat. The silence between them was comfortable, alive. "You didn't have to stay," she said quietly. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because if I left now, I'd be running again. I'm tired of running." She studied him. "My father will test you again. He always does. I expected as much. The next test will not be about killing. It will be about choosing." Cole sipped from the cup, the bitter tea grounding him. "Choosing what?" "Where you stand when the world splits." She looked toward the north, where the horizon pulsed with distant lightning. "The men from Lantry will come again, with more guns and paper." He set the cup down. "Then we'll be ready." She smiled faintly. "You sound like my father." Maybe that's not the worst thing to sound like. For a while they listened to the drums, to the laughter of children nearby, to the low murmur of women telling stories. Then Taya leaned forward, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "When I saw you run toward the bullets this morning, I thought you were mad." "I was. And now?" "Still mad. Just for a better reason." Her laughter was soft, quick, and gone. She reached up to touch the small, clouded bead at her throat, the one he'd returned to her that morning. "My mother wore this when she met my father. She said it carried two spirits, his and hers. Now it carries yours and mine." Cole didn't know what to say. The words that came out were plain and true. "Then I'll try to be worth half of it." She rose then, dusting her hands. "Sleep, Cole Mercer. Tomorrow we'll ask more of you." She hesitated, then added, "The lion will not be the last thing that hunts you." He watched her walk back toward the circle of firelight, the beads at her braid catching sparks like small stars. When she was gone, he lay on his back, beneath the sky. The stars looked close enough to gather, but he didn't. Some things needed distance to remind a man of scale. He thought of the spring beneath his cabin, of the water whispering through rock, older than language, stronger than any deed or law. He thought of the girl with the turquoise beads, and the father who spoke in riddles, sharper than bullets. And he thought, not for the first time, that maybe the land itself had chosen him not because he deserved it, but because it needed someone stubborn enough to listen. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it came clean. When dawn returned, the chief's shadow fell across him. "You proved you can hunt," Gray Thunder said. "Now we will see if you can stay." Cole rose, dust on his sleeves, the taste of morning on his tongue. "Then tell me what's next." The chief looked toward the eastern ridge, where thunderheads were building like mountains. "The men with papers will come again. This time, we will not meet them with rifles. We will meet them with the land itself." Taya appeared beside her father, her eyes steady, unreadable. Cole felt the old fear return, the kind that tells a man he's about to belong to something larger than himself. Gray Thunder's voice was calm. "You said you wished to live quiet, Mercer. The land offers no quiet now, only choice." Cole looked past them to the horizon, where the desert shimmered like a coin in a gambler's hand. He nodded once. "Then I choose." Part 3. Paper Wars and Blood Maps. The sky turned the color of hammered tin by mid-morning, flat light that made distance lie. Heat lifted off the benchland in shivers, blurring mesquite and greasewood into wavering mirages. Cole Mercer stood on the shale cut above Sandglass Basin, glassing the west with a spyglass so scratched it made the world look older than it was. He didn't need the glass to see trouble. He could hear it. The fitful clatter of wagons, the snap of a flag, the hard little echoes of bits and curb chains. When he did raise the tube and pull the smudged world into something like focus, he counted mules and men by their habits. How a driver sat a wagon, how an escort held his carbine, how a foreman barked without looking where he was pointing. 30, maybe more, he said, lowering the glass. 2 wagons with crates, rifles, or stakes. Surveyors up front, company man beside them in a collar too clean for dust. Hired guns behind. I see town faces, Lantry boys. A few from Kingsley. Beside him, Taya lay prone with her chin on her forearm, studying the same line with her naked eyes, as if glass only got in the way of listening. I count 34, she said. 4 mules to each wagon, spare animals on a lead. Their best shot rides left of the second wagon. He tips his hat after he fires. The marshal will be somewhere he believes safe enough to look brave. Cole lowered himself to the rock. Kiever will show when it costs least. Like paper, Taya said. Brave until wet. Down in the basin, Chief Gray Thunder had already set the day to its work. 24 Apache warriors, moved as if pulled by the same hand, some stringing brush along the lip of a dry arroyo to make it look like solid ground, others cutting narrow lanes through needlegrass so feet could run without whispering. Boys with signal mirrors crawled to the ridges. Older men checked lashings and set stakes where stakes had no right to be, marking ranges with bits of white stone pressed into dust. 80 paces, 120, 160. Women boiled rawhide and split it with obsidian to make quiet bindings that would hold when iron would ring. No one raised their voice. Noise is a tool. You use it last. Cole and Taya slid down the shale, boots careful, moving in the zigzag of men who feel watched even when they are alone. At the foot of the cut, Naichi waited thin as a fence picket, hair silvered, eyes the patient color of river stones. He handed Cole a small roll of linen and a twist of wire. "For your arm if today insists on signing it," he said. "And for gun springs that forget what they promised." Cole nodded his thanks, tucked the linen into his vest, and felt for the Henry's carrier spring with his thumbnail. It clicked the right way. A good sound. Gray Thunder stood at the edge of the wash, watching the horizon like a man reading a page he already knew by heart. The chief did not look at Cole when he spoke. He didn't have to. "We will not shoot first," he said. "Not because they deserve mercy. Because we deserve to choose." Cole glanced at Taya. She was adjusting the brace of arrows at her back. Quiet. Efficient. "What if they choose for us?" Cole asked. Gray Thunder lifted his chin at the dry arroyo, at the false brush lid, at the narrow cut where the land banked left between two flat rocks. "Then we will help their legs learn to dance," he said. He turned at last, eyes finding Cole's. "You will anchor the hinge," he said, "where the crescent closes at the cabin wall. Men who break through will come there. Hold. Do not chase." Cole nodded. "Aye. To chase a breaking line is to leave your own," the chief said. "Leave them to run. Let the desert finish what pride began." They moved then, each to his place in the shape of the day. Cole stepped into the porch shadow of his cabin and checked ranges with his eye. From the corner of the porch to the knee-high patch of sage just beyond the yard, 60 paces. To the thin mesquite at the wash bend, 90. To the brush lid over the arroyo, 110. He'd shot all those distances before, but never with this many ears listening for the click of a lever. Taya crouched at the left flank, where the wash cut a shallow S into the basin floor. She chose a notch between two stones and pushed a pinch of dust into the string serving to quiet it. She looked once toward Cole. He lifted his left hand palm open, fingers loose, nothing in it but the brief, practical promise of staying put. On the ridge behind them, a mirror winked 2 short flashes, a pause, then one long. North dust confirmed. Company on the march. They came as expected, and yet always a little differently than the mine's rehearsal. 2 surveyors first, stakes in their hands like banners, eyes down, not because they were humble but because they believed the ground owed them information. Behind them, the company man rode upright, collar starched into a moral. He gestured with a rolled paper as if it were a telescope that could see obedience. Marshal Keever hung back half a length, letting the company man spend his face first. Wagons creaked. The hired guns rode in twos, a loose file, 20 carbines, a few shotguns, several pistols. 2 men wore Civil War shells with mismatched buttons, the kind who never got used to peace. They stopped out of rifle range on a rise that made their words travel. The company man unrolled his paper like a flag. He had the smooth, pale hands of a man who thought ink could outrun dust. By authority of the Kingsley and Western Line, duly empowered by state charter and the undersigned judge, we claim the right of way and water at this section for public improvement, he called. He made public sound like a private joke. Gray Thunder stepped forward 3 paces and said nothing. Keever tried a different tactic. Familiarity. "Mercer," he called. "You know the law. Don't let yourself get pulled into a bad corner. Turn the place over now. We'll see the company makes it square." Cole answered without stepping from the porch shadow. "You don't have a square in your pocket, Marshal. Only a circle to put around someone else's neck." Keever's smile was small and busy. Law's a circle we all live inside, son. Not when one man draws it, Cole said. Then it's a noose. The company man raised the paper higher, as if the son might sign it. This document condemns. The first mirror flash, sharp, fast, clipped his sentence. Scouts on the North Ridge had watched something the company man could not see through his own certainty. A second file, peeling to the left, hoping to skirt the wash and roll the flank. Gray Thunder lifted his hand and let it fall. It looked like a small thing. It was not. On the left, Nietzsche's boys tugged a brush mat with a rawhide loop and a grunt. The false lid over the arroyo mouth slid back as if the ground had sighed. 3 of the flankers rode into it at a trot, horses trusting what eyes said. Brush gave, earth took. The first pony vanished to the shoulders. The rider's hat sailed. The second horse balked, slewed, slammed the third, and all 3 men went down in a tangle of legs and curses. Before their friends could turn to help, Taya's first arrow hissed and pinned a carbine hand to the rim of the arroyo with a neat, brutal finality. He dropped the gun, shock drowning his face. 2 hired guns fired wide at the movement. The bullets smacked the cabin eaves and spat splinters past Cole's ear. He had already counted the distance 85 paces to the arroyo rim and knew the drop. He thumbed a .44 to .40 into the Henry's carrier, let the golden cartridge settle with that small metallic agreement, and pressed the front sight until it blurred into the man who had fired second. He exhaled. He squeezed. The carbine kicker fell with the boneless looseness of a man whose legs forgot the old contract with the rest of him. The Basin held a moment of terrible stillness, then the kind that falls when everyone realizes the day has tipped and there's no getting it back upright. Keever's horse shied. The company man swore an oath so formal it sounded rehearsed. Somewhere, a mule brayed with the comic timing of an old actor with perfect instincts. Down! Keever shouted to his men who were too proud to save their own height. Take the rocks! Move! Hired guns kicked out of their saddles and scrambled for cover that did not exist. Needlegrass is not a wall. Mesquite is thin. The wash bent its S and offered a few bad choices. The first proper volley cracked Apache long rifles answering hired carbines. Smoke rolled low, stinging and sweet. The sound came in the old, ragged rhythm of men who must count their shots and choose their targets like words. Cole worked the Henry with a steady lever cadence: aim, fire, lever, breathe, aim, hold, keeping it all in the porch shadow, where a man's shape is harder to describe. He did not shoot at faces unless a face insisted. Hands, legs, hats take the machinery of harm. Twice he watched a hat leap from a head and roll like a small life trying to escape its purpose. Once he saw a man's hand snap open, the pistol flying as if relieved to be done. Taya's arrows traveled in calm sentences. She did not rush. One arrow sank into the hamstring of a man trying to crawl out of the arroyo. He stiffened, went silent, then began to breathe like a bellows. Another arrow she set low and angled. It cut a stirrup leather and sent its rider pitching into dust. All fight turned into the problem of finding air. On the right, the Wash S caught the main file as planned. The first rank tried to follow the surveyor's stakes, straight as a rule. The rule broke. Boots slipped on gravel that behaved like ball bearings. Men went to knees, hats off, rifles up at angles that could only hurt something by accident. Gray Thunder's rifles spoke then, patient and mean. A hired gun with a red kerchief tied too proud at his neck, arched backward, as if his spine had remembered a different man and tried to become him. He did not rise. A whistle blew the company man, of all people, trying to impose music on the day. "Push the wagons!" he yelled. "Make a wall! Up! Up!" They tried. Mules do not respect paper. The first wagon lurched, when a driver snapped the lines too hard, and the near mule sat down in its harness like an old dog refusing a bath. The off mule tried to pull alone, the wagon canted, the crate slid, and 50 rifles inside argued in a rattling language that promised no peace. The driver cut the traces, panicked, and caught his own hand with his own knife. Luck, or justice, or both. Keever finally brought his carbine into something like play. He fired 2 measured shots, one at the smoke on the left rim, one at the mirror where a boy's bright signal had kept his men honest. The first bullet threw a spark off rock. The second broke the mirror to glitter. The boy flattened, rolled, showed Keever nothing to shoot but a hat. Keever shot the hat. It flipped off the ridge like a bird that had changed its mind about flight. He grinned, quick and tight, as if he'd killed a rumor. "Push right," the company man bawled, voice breaking. "Ride them! Ride through!" The right tried. Men always try. 3 rushed the hinge where Cole held the porch line. They came bent forward in that committed run men assume when they cannot bear to be small anymore. Cole set the Henry against his shoulder and chose angles. He put a bullet into the plank beside the first man's knees. Splinters cut his shins, and he stumbled, cursing the wood as if the wood had meant it. The second man swung a scattergun up from his hip. Cole ducked, felt dirt jump at his feet, where the shot tore it, and came up into his sight picture already made. He touched the trigger and the scattergunner folded around a sudden, silent center. The third man made the porch steps and brought a knife down in a high, terrible arc that has killed many men who do not know it is a bad arc. Cole stepped inside it, caught the man's wrist with his left palm, and hit the inside of his elbow with the Henry's forend. Joints do what they must. The knife fell. Cole butt stroked the man across the cheekbone hard enough to give his face a new map. He collapsed, sobbing the way a man sobs when he realizes breath matters more than plan. "Hold." Gray Thunder's voice came, low, even, carrying without effort. "Do not chase." On the left, a hired gun with a long coat and an older man's caution had found a place where rock touched rock and left a rifle slot. He began to do careful work, shooting not at shapes but at elbows and edges. Men who shoot at edges scare good fighters. Cole marked him and waited for the man to fire, watched the smoke curl from his slot, and counted to 3 the way his teacher had told him long ago. 1 for the man's breath, 1 for his pride in the shot, 1 for the small pause of satisfaction that makes the next man. Then Cole sent a round into the slot where the smoke had been. The long coat went still. A black hat rolled out and settled in a manner that did not belong to the living. Taya lifted a hand flat, fingers together toward the scouts on the ridge, a signal to watch the rear trail. She had seen what Cole had smelt, the faint, sour smell of mule sweat coming from the south when all the trouble rode from the west. The company thought itself clever. A second, smaller party swinging low to make a bite at the back of the line. Nietzsche's boys were cleverer. Brush that looked like brush was harnessed to rawhide that looked like roots. On Taya's second-hand signal, they heaved together. A waist-high wall of sticks and stones rose across the rear trail in the time it takes a man to say wait, which is often longer than he has. The rear party hit it and bunched like cattle at a ford, confused, angry, loud. Confusion is also a tool. Gray Thunder did not let it go to waste. 2 to the right, 5 to the rear, he said, almost conversational, as if ordering coffee. The line flexed and made a shallow pocket. Men in the pocket do the dumbest brave thing they know. They charge. They did. Straight into the narrow where the wash bent them into each other and made their rifles the wrong length. Cole did not fire there. He would be shooting into his friends soon enough. He cut the legs of 2 men who tried to climb the porch rail. One tumbled backward into the man behind him and made him shoot the sky. The other rolled off the step with a howl, when a splinter the size of a new pencil slid under his skin and made him a child again. He crawled to the wash and lay there, breathing loud, learning something about limits. The noon lull came like a lid dropping. Smoke thinned. Men found themselves suddenly, stupidly thirsty. Someone no one later could say who called cease, with the authority of a sergeant who had earned it in another war and could still loan it to strangers. Fire slackened. A mule blew snot and shook its head as if to rid itself of the whole idea of men. Part 4. Asking water to choose. They worked at dusk when the wind had a softer hand. Brush, willow, rock layered into the narrow of the wash a quarter-mile above the cabin. A false gate, where the first thunderhead of summer would naturally pause, but the sky was clean. The water they meant to use had to come from below. Cole and an elder named Naiche walked the dry bed and tapped the caliche with hand tools, dulled enough not to be greedy. They opened old seams and asked Flo to remember a path. Taya oversaw the catch points, places where a wall would hold for a minute, then fail loud and sudden. The plan was not to drown men, it was to lift their feet from the ground they trusted, and let their rifles become expensive sticks. At midnight, the basin cooled to something that could be breathed without argument. Coyotes spoke briefly, like cousins waving across a road. Cole and Taya sat on the cabin step, boots touching, not in romance but in treaty. "Who taught you to hear water?" she asked. "A woman who took me in when I had more bones than rights," Cole said. "She said if I listened long enough, every fence post would tell me who said it, and every creek would confess where it wanted to go." "She sounds like someone our grandmothers would have liked," Taya said. "She died on a day men were busy making new maps," Cole answered. "I think she went so she didn't have to see them fail." Wind moved a scrap of mesquite shadow over Taya's wrist. She turned it palm up, and without planning to, Cole set his own there. Her fingers closed. It wasn't a vow. It was the plainest kind of promise two people can make when they don't yet have the language for the larger one. Dawn sniffed the edges. The company man returned with more bodies, some in proper boots, some in miners' shoes too thin for ambition. Keever had a writ rolled in his fist, like he'd use it as a club if necessary. His voice carried. By authority, the wall of water did not honor sentences. It came like a herd that had remembered a trail, not tall, waist-high maybe, but dense, with brush and grit, and the small, unarguable power of things that add to themselves as they go. It hit the lead ranks at a slant, and men became legs and elbows and shouts that didn't sound like law. Rifles went off into the sky. Somebody's hat sailed past like an idea that had missed its time. Keever's horse reared and unseated an unworthy rider. The company man vanished, then reappeared coughing words no one cared to keep. Gray Thunder's line did not advance. They watched the water break the fight, then stepped down with ropes to fetch men out before water could teach them last lessons. Even mercy can be stern. The rescued were marched out, coughing and small. When quiet took the basin again, Cole felt a tremor underfoot, new flow finding new toys. He knelt, palm flat. The vibration was not angry. It was awake. "It will come back cleaner," Naiche said beside him, as if answering what Cole didn't say out loud. Sometimes a river needs to run through men to remember it's a river. That evening, the council fire came early. Elders spoke in loops that began somewhere near the beginning of things. Gray Thunder listened and did that rare leader's trick. He changed his mind out loud. "The cabin stands," he said. "The man stays. The spring breathes because he decided not to own it." He turned to Cole. "If you live here, you will live inside our story. That does not ask you to forget yours, but when they pull a paper on you, you will answer with our names as well as your own." Cole felt something unclench in him that he had been calling hunger for too many years. "Then my trouble is also your trouble," he said. the sentence feeling good in his mouth. Taya's eyes at the firelight's edge were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the flame. She stepped forward and drew a beaded thong from her wrist. The clouded bead now matched with the one Cole had returned. She looped it around his neck and let it fall to rest against his chest. "So you don't forget which side of the river you chose," she said. He couldn't speak for a long breath he hadn't planned to lose. Part 5. The day the map burned. Word went up the line faster than telegraph men had failed. Where paper promised they'd win, the company tried a last shape of power. A judge, a sheriff from the next county, and a dozen men sworn in just long enough to point guns legally. They rode in on a Sunday as if God would sign the writ if it was waved high enough. The judge read words from a page, so knew the ink smelled nervous. He quoted statutes, the wind disregarded, and made a mouth at the sky like a man who thinks it owes him listening. When he finished, Gray Thunder nodded, as if he'd heard a story with an ending he'd expected. "Now we read ours," the chief said. Che unfolded a deer hide, painted with rivers and stars. It showed the spring before. There was a word for it in English. It placed burial grounds in the map's center, the way a heart sits in a chest. He spoke the names of old mothers and the paths they walked. He said the words for "we promised" and "we kept." The judge laughed, that small laugh men make when they fear being moved. "That is not a map," he said. Cole stepped forward, the beaded thong cool against his chest. He held up the company's paper, which Keever had so obligingly left within reach. When the wash had opinions, he showed the surveyor's neat lines and the distance between them and the truth. "This is not the land," he said. "This is someone's wish about it." He struck a match on his boot heel, let the flame think a moment, then touched it to the paper's corner. It took and climbed, and made a sound like tiny mouths. He held it until it was too honest to keep, then dropped it in the dust. The judge went pale with the specific anger of men whose spells fail. Keever reached for his gun, and found himself staring at 6 Apache muzzles and Taya's arrowhead, not sure whether his right or left eye would be the better lesson. He froze into the shape of a different man than the one who had ridden in. The sheriff, from the next county older, shoulders with some memory of carrying right, looked around, did long math in his head, and sighed. "Call it a boundary dispute," he said. "I don't see a crime I care to carry to my grave." He turned his horse. 2 of the sworn-in men, suddenly less sworn, followed. The judge stayed long enough to gather ash in his expression, and then he went, too. Keever was last. He looked at Cole with a promise that had no legs and spit into dust that didn't keep it. When they were gone and the sound of their leaving had the courtesy to thin, Gray Thunder turned to his people. "We guard without hating," he said. "We remember without drowning in remembering. The spring is not saved. It is watched." That night, no one called it a wedding, because that word had too many flags attached. But there was a circle, and Taya stood in it with Cole, and Gray Thunder spoke words that did the work vows do, even when they choose different shoes. He placed his hand on Cole's shoulder, the way a man sets a post right and trusts it to stand. Taya's fingers found Cole's. "We chose the river," she said. "We chose not to be alone near it," he answered. Old women laughed and cried the way only victories that cost names make them do. Boys grinned in that keen, proud way that means they are memorizing someone's gait. The bead at Cole's throat rose and fell with his breath, as if it were learning his name from the inside. Later, when the fires were low, and the Basin had put its ear back to the earth to hear what tomorrow wanted, Cole and Taya walked to the wash. The false dam was already breaking itself down, the way good traps do after their work is finished. Frogs found edges. A fox stutter stepped a crossing and then chose. Cole listened. The water sounded not grateful exactly, but more itself. Taya leaned into his shoulder. "The men will come again," she said. "Yes." Cole said. But so will we. He could feel her smile in the place where her temple touched his jaw. Old West stories, she murmured, not as a brand but as a truth. They don't end. They keep walking beside you until you learn to walk as well. The horizon held a thin promise of rain. Somewhere beyond it, men were making new maps. Here, under a sky large enough to shame paper, two people kept a spring, honest with their quiet, their hands, and a promise they would keep repeating until the earth believed them. And the basin breathed. The gunfire faded, and the basin held its breath once more. When the smoke cleared, only footprints, blood, and broken paper marked the field. Cole Mercer stood with the Apache, not as a prisoner but as one of them. The spring beneath his cabin still flowed, clean and stubborn, just like the people who defended it. In that silence, he finally understood. The West never belonged to those who claimed it, only to those who kept it alive. If you felt this story, subscribe and keep the fire burning, because every dawn out here still carries the echo of Old West stories, where courage has a name, love finds a frontier, and legends never die.